There's a certain era of aviation where nobody really knew what worked, so they would just build the most absurd planes imaginable. The Vought V-173 is the perfect example of this. With a shape that looks like a smushed frog, this plane is one of the goofiest looking things that I have ever seen. This plane actually has a very specific purpose though, and that was to fly as slow as possible. But why would they actually need a plane that could do that? Charles Zimmerman was an engineer for NACA that specialized in flight dynamics, stability, and control. In 1933, Zimmerman envisioned a new aircraft configuration in which the propeller wake blanketed the entire wing of the aircraft. And with a flying wing configuration, where the entire aircraft body produces lift, this could produce much greater lift at very low speeds. He placed the propellers at the wingtips to reduce induced drag, which is drag created by the pressure difference at the end of the wing. The bottom of the wing experiences high pressure and the top of the wing experiences low pressure. When these two regions meet, it produces a swirling vortex of air, often strongest and most visible at the wingtip. This vortex pushes air downwards, called downwash. Here's how the lift and drag look for an airplane without downwash. When we add downwash, it effectively reduces the angle of attack of the aircraft. The lift gets tilted backwards with respect to the plane, contributing to induced drag. In low-speed flight, induced drag is very important, so reducing it is vital for low-speed aircraft performance. The propellers on the V-173 rotated outwards to oppose the direction of the wingtip vortex, which helped reduce the downwash and induce drag. The design of a flying wing is also intended to reduce drag by eliminating features like the fuselage and empennage, so the entire plane is a lifting body. The plane was also given a circular shape that maximizes its area and allows it to create more lift. This shape is what gives it the nickname, the Flying Pancake. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that they used to make the most absurd planes imaginable. No company or government today would make a plane that looks like an amoeba painted bright yellow and nicknamed the Flying Pancake. It just doesn't happen anymore. Bring back goofy planes, please. Anyway, with this configuration, the propellers were also designed to immerse the entire plane in their slipstream so that the wing body would have airflow over it, even at low airspeeds. Also, given that the propellers cancel out the tip vortices, they naturally rotate in opposite directions, which makes the plane more stable and reduces the effect of gyroscopic moments. With the propeller's slipstream intended to cover the entire plane, the propellers were comically large. Each propeller was 16.5 feet long, which created the need to angle the plane upwards by 22 degrees while on the ground. Similar to Concorde, this meant that the pilots couldn't see during takeoff and landing. The Flying Pancake, however, had no snoot to droop, so they had the front window wrap around to the floor. The Pancake itself was 23.3 feet in diameter and included two vertical and horizontal stabilizers with rudders and elevators respectively. Zimmerman estimated that the plane could operate from 40 to 425 miles per hour, and with more powerful engines, potentially even reaching 450 miles per hour. With this design, Charles Zimmerman pitched it to NACA, but they directed him towards the private industry, where he then developed the concept with Vought in 1937, the aircraft company, not the one with Homelander. Vought then built a quarter-scale model and pitched the design to who else but the Navy. You can imagine that around the 1940s, the Navy was quite interested in an aircraft with short takeoff and landing capabilities for aircraft carriers. The slow-flying Pancake was built for this role. The Associate Director of Research at NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center in Edwards, California, Al Bowers, said, quote, "When you start blowing that amount of air with that amount of power over a fairly large wing area, you can generate a fair amount of powered lift and end up with very, very short takeoff and landing rolls, which of course the Navy would love to see." On May 4th, 1940, the Navy placed a contract for one V-173 Flying Pancake, which was built and completed its first flight on November 23rd, 1942. The Navy pilots actually seemed to not hate the strange aircraft, making comments about how it could nearly hover and having good stability and maneuverability. Vought's chief pilot said, quote, "I was able to apply full power, raise the nose as high as it could be held, and have control about all three axes without stalling. It also survived multiple forced landings without seriously hurting the plane or pilot. The Pancake could take off within 200 feet with no headwind and could complete a zero-roll takeoff with a 30-mile-per-hour headwind. So with the right conditions, it could take off and land almost anywhere. It also had a top speed of 138 miles per hour and took 7 minutes to climb to 5,000 feet. In September 1941, the Navy then ordered a military version called the XF-5U-1. This version was powered by Pratt & Whitney R2000 engines and included 4-bladed propellers instead of 3. According to the U.S. Naval Institute, the Pancake would have 3 50-caliber machine guns on each side of the cockpit with a magazine capacity of 400 rounds per gun. It would also hold 2 1,000-pound bombs under the fuselage. Unfortunately, the XF-5U-1 never flew, with the contract being cancelled in May of 1947. The cancellation came as the necessity for the plane waned with the end of World War II and with the advent of the turbojet engine. The program was also over budget and behind schedule, which made it an easy target for cancellation. The V-173 spent a total of 131 hours in the air across nearly 200 flights. Today, the remaining V-173 is on display at the Frontiers of Flight Museum in Dallas, Texas. Unfortunately, the XF-5Us were scrapped after the program's cancellation. Another fun fact is that Charles Lindbergh himself flew in the V-173. The problem with the Pancake, according to National Air and Space Museum curator Russell Lee, was that while it, quote, may be able to do one or two things really well, anybody who's going to design something for production or widespread use has to consider how practical it is overall. It was always going to be slower than a jet, and the jet was just then coming into practical use. The U.S. Naval Institute actually calls it an abject failure, but I disagree. In a previous video, I ripped on the Avro car for just being a big circle with no aerodynamic qualities. That thing is an abject failure. It came nowhere near achieving its goals and had, in my opinion, very questionable design decisions. The Pancake, however, worked quite well. The pilots liked it and verified that it did perform well at low speeds, which was the entire goal of the project. The Pancake's downfall wasn't due to its own failure to live up to expectations, but more due to the development of the turbojet, which is one of the most revolutionary times in aviation. Sure, the plane might not have gone as fast as Zimmerman expected, but he never got the chance to test it with the more powerful engines. And I know it's quite goofy looking, but it actually seemed like a reasonable design built on solid principles that performed reasonably well. It was designed for low speed, but also capable of high speed, but just had the misfortune of existing right before the turbojet that would make it obsolete. It was designed for low speed, right before very high speeds would become the standard. Also, whoever decided to paint it bright yellow is a genius. It's so hideous, but it complements that like poison dart frog look so well. This plane is so beautifully weird looking, but worked well enough that I wish we could just bring it back. I would pay good money to see this shovel looking thing fly overhead. I actually really like this plane now, and I will not accept any slander of it. That's the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm posting a new video every month this year, so please subscribe if you want to see more. Bye.